The frozen goodbye. The wind howled like a wounded animal across the flat white of the prairie, sweeping snow in sheets against the door of the small timber cabin. Inside, Eleanor Marks rocked gently in the creaking chair, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders and her arms cradling the tiny, squirming forms of her newborn daughters. Hannah whimpered in her right arm. Hope stirred weakly in her left. The fire had died 3 hours ago. She had stopped counting the hours since Samuel left. It had been weeks, perhaps more. Each dawn blurred into the next like brushstrokes on a cold canvas. He had said he would return before the first deep freeze. He had kissed her forehead, touched her swollen belly, and promised he'd bring food and cloth and warmth from the trading post. He never returned. At first, Eleanor defended him. The snow must have delayed him, she whispered to the babies. He's trying, he wouldn't leave us. But as her husband's old coat sagged over her shoulders and her children's lips turned a faint blue, the truth snapped into her like frostbite. Samuel Clay had abandoned them. Why still? He was never hers to begin with. She had been a fool. After Elias, her husband, died under a falling pine 2 seasons ago, the silence had grown unbearable. When Samuel came, smiling, offering salted pork and soft words, she mistook kindness for love. She craved touch, laughter, warmth, and in a reckless moment beneath the stars, she gave him everything. He took it without pause. Now, here she sat, barely able to keep her daughter's feet warm. The cabin's walls, once lined with dried herbs and hung linen, now held nothing but frost. "I'm sorry," she murmured into the downy tufts of the girl's hair. "Mama tried. I thought he cared." One last log remained beside the hearth. She stayed at it, torn. Burn it now for one last hour of warmth, or save it in case a blizzard came through the night. The wind made her choice. Clutching her babies to her chest, she stewed, knees trembling. The cradle, her husband's own as a child, lay empty beside the cot. She pressed her lips to it in parting. Then she pushed open the cabin door. The cold bit her skin instantly, 1,000 invisible knives slicing through fabric. But she kept moving. Her boots cracked through snowbanks, the fur lining soaked and stiff. The babies whimpered again, sensing the change. Ellie kissed them both. "It's all right. We'll find help. Someone will take us in." She followed the old wagon track west, where Samuel had gone, where the trading roads lay. She had no map, no lantern, just a heart full of shame, fear, and the desperate instinct of a mother with nothing left to lose. Each step grew heavier. The weight of her daughters pressed down like stones, yet she didn't falter. Her body screamed for rest, for warmth, for mercy. But there was none. The sun began to sink, casting long violet shadows across the snow. Her vision blurred. She couldn't tell if the tears froze on her cheeks or if they had ever fallen at all. When she finally stumbled, knees folding beneath her, the snow caught her gently. The girls lay quiet now, too quiet. She pulled them close beneath the fur and crooned a lullaby her mother once sang to her, a song of rivers and stars. Then, silence. A distant sound, a sharp crack, like an axe splitting wood, echoed faintly through the wind. Ellie turned her head, but her eyes were heavy. The twins did not stay. She blinked against the snowflakes settling on their faces. "Help!" she tried to whisper. "Please." But the snow answered only with stillness. A stranger among the snow. The sun crept over the frostbitten ridge, its rays weak and pale as they cast light on the endless white. The world had frozen in place, except for the steady chop of an axe echoing through the stillness. Thomas Granger grunted as he split another log, the motion practiced and mechanical. Each strike cracked not just the wood, but the silence that had wrapped his homestead for over a year. The rhythm was his only companion now, the only thing that kept his thoughts from drifting back to Clara. He paused, resting his hands on the worn handle. Snowflakes clung to his beard, and his breath came out in clouds. Behind him, the cabin stood firm, smoke rising from the chimney, proof of life, though barely. Clara had died there. The memory came as it always did, without warning, sharp and punishing. Her scream during childbirth. The stillness of the child that never took its first breath. The cold, far colder than this one, that swallowed them both. Thomas wiped his face with a sleeve and turned back toward the stack of firewood. Then he heard it. A cry. Faint. High-pitched. Not wind. Not animal. Human. He dropped the axe and turned toward the sound. Heart thudding. It came again, soft and desperate. Through the trees, just beyond the rise. He moved quickly, trudging through knee-deep snow, his boots cracking the frozen crust with each step. As he reached the ridge, his breath caught. There, crumpled in the snow like a discarded rag doll, lay a woman. Her hair was half buried in frost, her skin pale as the drifts around her. But it was the bundle in her arms that stopped him cold. Two. Twins. They were barely wrapped, just a wool blanket around both, and the woman's body shielding them from the wind. One of the infants whimpered, the sound sharp against the silence. Thomas dropped to his knees. God in heaven. He pressed 2 fingers gently to the woman's throat. Faint. A pulse. He worked quickly, gathering the children first into his coat, tucking them beneath the layers against his chest. Then he lifted the woman into his arms. She was light. Too light. Back at the cabin, he laid them all near the fire. The woman's lips were tinged blue, but her breath had steadied. He wrapped her in pelts and rubbed warmth into her hands. The babies, girls, he realized, clung to life with weak cries, their skin blotched from cold but not yet lost. He fed them warmed goat's milk with a rag, the way Clara had taught him when they prepared for their own child. He hadn't used that rag since, until now, when the woman stirred at last. Her eyes fluttered open like fading embers reigniting. She looked first to the fire, then to the cradle he'd placed near it. Her voice cracked. My girls. They are safe, he said quietly, without turning. Warm and fed. You got lucky. She blinked. Her lips trembled. Who are you? Thomas Granger, he replied. This is my land. Silence stretched between them, heavy and cautious. I'm Eleanor, she said after a long pause. Eleanor Marks. He nodded but said nothing more. He wasn't ready to ask what had brought her out in that storm. Not yet. She looked like a woman who'd already lost more than she dared speak aloud. The fire popped. I didn't think we'd make it, she whispered, mostly to herself. I thought it was over. Thomas stirred the flames. It almost was. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentler now. The storm had passed, but the cold still ruled the land. Eleanor sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket tighter. Her gaze shifted to the twins sleeping in the cradle. His cradle, built with his own hands for the child he never held. You saved us, she said softly, voice full of something between wonder and shame. Thomas didn't respond. He stood and moved to the window, watching the snowflakes drift past the glass like ghosts. I didn't save you, he muttered, more to the shadows than to her. You're just here now, same as me. Fireside truths. For days that followed were slow and silent. Eleanor remained by the fire, tending to the twins with delicate, trembling hands. Though color had returned to her cheeks, her eyes stayed hollow, darkened by more than cold. She barely spoke unless to soothe the babies, her voice quiet as snow falling on pine. Thomas worked outside most of the day, chopping wood, hauling water, checking traps. But he always left a pot of broth near the fire, and a tin cup of goat's milk warmed for the girls. He didn't ask questions, and she offered no answers. Still, the questions swelled between them like unspoken ghosts in the room. It wasn't until the third night that she broke the silence. I should have died out there. Thomas didn't look up. He sat at the table, whittling a thin branch into something shapeless. The firelight cast shadows across his jaw, flickering like doubt in his expression. You didn't, he replied flatly. I was walking toward nothing, she continued. I thought maybe, if I just disappeared, someone would find the girls. Maybe they'd have a better chance without me. He looked at her now, eyes narrowed. You were gonna die on purpose. She swallowed. Not at first, but when I saw how cold it was, how far I still had to go, I think part of me stopped trying. Thomas set down the carving. You had those babies in your arms. I know. Her voice cracked. That's what makes it worse. Silence again. Only the crackle of fire, the soft sigh of wind against the window panes. After a while, Thomas spoke. You don't seem like someone who gives up easy. I didn't used to, she whispered. He stood, crossed the room, and poked at the fire with a stick. So what happened? She hesitated. Then the words spilled, quietly, cautiously, as if peeling back layers of herself she'd tried to forget. I lost my husband to an accident. Elias. He was good, strong, the kind who never let me carry the heavy pail even when my back could take it better than his. We didn't have much, but we had plans. She paused. After he died, the silence, it was like being buried alive. Months passed. Then Samuel came. Thomas stiffened but didn't interrupt. He was a trader. Smooth, kind of first. He brought what I needed, flour, sugar, news from the road. He talked like someone who saw me. Not the widow, just me. Thomas stayed into the fire. I let myself believe he cared. I was already with child when he left the last time. He promised to return before the freeze. Her voice faltered. He never did. Thomas leaned on the mantel, head bowed. So he seduced you, left you pregnant, and vanished. She nodded, shame thick in her throat. I wasn't even sure he was ever mine. I think he liked the idea of me more than the truth of me. Once I was no longer convenient, he disappeared like smoke. The confession hung in the air. Finally, Thomas said, my wife, Clara, she died giving birth. The child didn't survive either. Eleanor's eyes softened. I'm so sorry. I buried them on the hill just west of here, he continued. For a long time, I thought maybe I should have gone with them. He walked to the cradle and looked down at the twins, Hannah and Hope, sleeping soundly, tiny fists curled against their cheeks. But you showed up, and I remembered what it's like to hear crying and know it means someone's still fighting. She looked at him then, not with fear or shame, but something warmer, braver. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly, for being so foolish, for letting a man like Samuel into my life. Thomas shook his head. I'm not here to judge, just trying to keep everyone warm. He hesitated, then picked up the whittled branch. It was shaped like a small rattle, the wood smooth and rounded. Not much, he muttered, handing it to her. But I figured the girls could use something that wasn't made of snow or sorrow. Eleanor took it with both hands, overcome by the gesture. Her fingers brushed his. Neither pulled away. Thank you, she whispered, tears welling. Thomas cleared his throat. You'll need a cradle of your own soon. Twins won't stay that small forever. Do you think we can stay here for a little while? She asked, barely audible. He nodded slowly, one storm at a time. When the snow melts, the snow began to loosen its grip on the land, melting in slow rivulets down the sloped roof of the cabin. Patches of brown earth peeked through the frost like secrets returning from the dead. Where winter had silenced everything, spring whispered of new beginnings. Inside, the cabin had changed too. A cradle now stood beside the hearth, hand-carved, sturdy, and wide enough for two. Eleanor had lined it with soft fabric from an old quilt, and Thomas had etched tiny birds and vines into the sides. The girls were growing quickly, eyes wide and alert, fingers grasping at the world with relentless curiosity. Eleanor folded laundry near the fire, her movements calm, practiced. She wore a blue shawl Thomas had found in a forgotten trunk. It reminded her of her mother, of simpler days before everything had unraveled. Thomas entered quietly, brushing snow from his shoulders. Cows are restless, he said. Must be sensing the thaw. They're smarter than they look, she replied with a small smile. He smiled back, briefly, but warmer than before. These days, their silences were filled not with tension, but understanding. A peace had settled between them, fragile and real. As the girls napped, Eleanor stepped outside with Thomas. The air still bit at her cheeks, but there was life in the wind now. The trees groaned with melting ice. Far off, birds called to one another. She stopped near the hill just west of the cabin. Two small markers, weathered by time and snow, sat undisturbed in the clearing. Clara and the child. I haven't come up here since you arrived, Thomas said, voice low. You don't have to, Eleanor said gently. I know. He stayed at the markers. But I want to. They stood in silence. The grief between them wasn't something to solve or fix. It was part of who they were, carved into them like the grain in wood. I used to think letting go meant forgetting her, Thomas said. But now I think maybe it just means making room for someone else. Eleanor's breath caught. She looked at him, really looked at him. The scars, the sorrow, the kindness he tried to hide. I'm not proud of how I got here, she said. And I don't expect anyone to call me strong. But I want to raise them with honesty. And if there's still room, I'd like to stay. Thomas turned toward her. I don't care about what came before, he said. What matters is you fought. You got them here alive. You didn't disappear into that snow. His voice softened. You walked into death and brought life with you. They stood close now. No promises, no grand declarations. Just the kind of closeness born from shared pain and unexpected mercy. He reached for her hand. Stay, he said simply. She nodded. Later that evening, Thomas lit a fire while Eleanor rocked the girls. He handed her a tin mug of cider, and they watched the flames together in quiet companionship. The babies cooed and reached for one another in the cradle, as if even they understood they were no longer alone. Eleanor touched the locket around her neck. Samuel's. She kept it, not out of love, but as a reminder. She opened it one last time, then stood, walked to the door, and flung it into the woods beyond the ridge. The wind carried it away without ceremony. When she returned, Thomas looked up but said nothing. He didn't need to. The air in the cabin felt lighter. Later that week, she found him carving another toy, a small horse this time. They'll want to play outside when the ground thaws, he said, eyes twinkling. I figure someone ought to build them a proper corral. You planning to teach them ranching? She teased. I figure someone should, he replied. Might as well be me. She sat beside him. The fire crackled. The girls slept peacefully in the cradle that once held nothing but ashes of hope. And outside, beneath the melting snow, something green had begun to grow.